Welcome to Health Wisdom. I'm Dr. William, and I've spent 15 years practicing internal medicine. In all that time, one of the most extraordinary things I've ever learned about the human body is this. Right now, inside you, there is a biological process quietly hunting down diseased cells, including early cancer cells, and literally consuming them from the inside out. Think of it like a Pac-Man built right into your cellular machinery. This process breaks down damaged, worn out, and abnormal cells all the way to the molecular level, and then, here's the beautiful part, it actually reuses those same building blocks to create healthier, stronger cellular components. It is one of the most powerful natural anti-cancer mechanisms that science has ever identified. And it's not some fringe theory. The discovery of this process was considered so groundbreaking that it earned a Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine back in 2016. So if you've never heard about this before, I completely understand, because most people haven't. But by the end of this video, I promise you're going to walk away seeing your body in a completely different way. This remarkable process is called autophagy, and I want to spend a moment really breaking down what that word means, because understanding it changes everything. Autophagy literally comes from the Greek words for self and eating. And while that might sound alarming at first, it is actually one of the most elegant and life-saving things your body does. Inside every single one of your cells, there are tiny structures that function like internal quality control inspectors. When autophagy is activated, these structures move throughout the cell, scanning for damaged proteins, worn-out energy-producing components, and cells that have started to behave abnormally. Once they find this damaged material, they wrap it inside a protective membrane, transport it to the cell's built-in recycling center, and break it all the way down into raw molecular parts that can then be used to build brand new, healthy cellular structures. It is a system so sophisticated and so precise that no pharmaceutical drug has ever come close to replicating it. And the best news? You already have it. The question is whether it's switched on or not. Now let me explain why this matters so deeply when it comes to cancer, because this is where things get really important. A lot of people imagine cancer as something that just suddenly appears, like one day you're healthy and the next day something goes terribly wrong. But that's not how it actually works. Cancer begins with a series of very small cellular mistakes that accumulate over time, gradually pushing a normal, healthy cell toward increasingly abnormal behavior. It's a slow process, and that slow process is exactly where autophagy steps in. Autophagy is one of the body's primary defense systems for catching these early cellular errors and correcting them before they ever have the chance to develop into something serious. Think of it as your body's built-in early warning system, constantly monitoring for trouble and cleaning it up before it spreads. In the context of cancer prevention, this is enormously significant. Autophagy doesn't just remove damaged material, it specifically targets the kinds of cellular dysfunction that, if left unchecked, could eventually become cancerous. This is why scientists around the world are studying it so intensely right now. However, there is one absolutely critical point that most people completely miss, and I see this misunderstanding even among well-educated patients I've spoken with over the years. Autophagy does not run at full power all the time. It is not a constant background process that just hums along no matter what you do. It is switched on and off by very specific biological signals. And here's the problem. Modern lifestyles suppress many of those signals every single day without people even realizing it. Constant eating, chronic stress, poor sleep, lack of physical movement, and exposure to certain environmental toxins all work together to keep autophagy suppressed. When autophagy is suppressed, damaged and abnormal cells are not being cleared out efficiently. They accumulate, they linger. And over time, that accumulation creates the exact biological environment where disease, including cancer, can take root and grow. So the real question isn't whether autophagy is powerful. We know it is. The real question is, how do we consistently reactivate it? And that's exactly what I want to walk you through today. The first strategy I want to share with you is something I call protein cycling. And I want to be honest with you, most people have never heard of this approach to activating autophagy, even though the science behind it is genuinely compelling. Most of the conversation around autophagy focuses on fasting. And yes, Fasting does activate autophagy, primarily because it lowers insulin levels and switches on a critical cellular energy sensor called AMPK. But there is a second biological pathway that almost never gets discussed, and it may actually be just as powerful. Your cells are constantly monitoring how much protein is available through a signaling system called mTOR. When mTOR detects that protein is abundant, it suppresses autophagy and sends your cells a clear message: grow. Now, for healthy cells, that's fine. But cancer cells exploit this growth signal more aggressively than almost any other cell type in the body. In fact, overactive mTOR signaling is one of the most commonly altered pathways found across virtually all types of human cancer. When mTOR senses that protein is scarce, it does the opposite. It shifts the cell into recycling mode and activates autophagy to clean out accumulated debris. Research published in the prestigious journal Cell Metabolism found that periodic protein restriction activated autophagy just as powerfully as calorie restriction, while also independently suppressing mTOR activity across multiple tissues throughout the body. That is a remarkable finding. And the practical takeaway from this research is surprisingly simple and completely manageable for most people. 1 day per week, intentionally reduce your protein intake below your normal level. On that day, focus primarily on vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, keeping protein to a minimum. On the other 6 days of the week, eat adequate protein to support healthy muscle maintenance and normal body function. The key biological signal here is not permanent protein restriction that would actually be harmful over time. The powerful anti-cancer signal comes from the healthy cycling between higher and lower protein intake. That rhythmic variation is what keeps the mTOR pathway in check and keeps autophagy regularly activated. It's a small, sustainable shift that most people can realistically incorporate into their weekly routine without any dramatic lifestyle overhaul. The second powerful way to activate autophagy is through heat stress. And I want to take a moment here because this one genuinely surprises most people when they first hear it. When your body is exposed to significant heat, like the kind you experience in a sauna, your cells activate a protective survival mechanism known as the heat shock response. Part of this response involves a dramatic and measurable increase in autophagy, specifically designed to eliminate the damaged proteins that heat stress produces. But the benefits go even further than that. The heat shock proteins generated during this process also help direct your immune system toward cancer cells. As autophagy clears away heat-damaged cellular debris, it actually exposes abnormal molecular markers on the surface of unhealthy cells, making them far easier for your immune system to recognize and destroy. This is a beautiful example of two powerful biological systems working together in perfect coordination. A landmark study published in JAMA Internal Medicine found that people who used a sauna regularly, between 4 and 7 sessions per week, experienced approximately a 40% reduction in all-cause mortality, with lower cancer mortality believed to be one of the key contributing factors. For practical application, I recommend aiming for sauna sessions of about 15 to 20 minutes at temperatures between 80 and 100 degrees Celsius, repeated 4 to 7 times per week if possible. Now, I understand that not everyone has easy access to a sauna, and I want to acknowledge that. But if you do have access, whether at a gym, a wellness center, or a community facility, this is genuinely one of the most well-researched longevity tools available to us right now. The data on regular sauna use is not preliminary or speculative. It is robust, it is consistent across multiple large studies, and it points clearly in one direction. Regular heat exposure does something profoundly beneficial inside the human body at the cellular level. And when you understand that a significant part of that benefit comes from the activation of autophagy, it stops feeling like a luxury and starts feeling like medicine. Because in a very real biological sense, that's exactly what it is. Now, before we get into the final 3 strategies, I want to pause for just a moment. If what you're hearing in this video is already shifting the way you think about autophagy and cancer prevention, I genuinely appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button right now. I put a tremendous amount of time and care into making sure the information I share on this channel is grounded in real science and presented in a way that actually helps people make better decisions for their health. Every subscriber helps this channel reach more people who need this information. Okay, let's keep going, because the next strategy involves two specific compounds that I find absolutely fascinating from a scientific standpoint. The third trigger for autophagy involves a combination of two powerful naturally occurring molecules, spermidine and urolithin A. I know those names sound unusual, but stay with me, because what these compounds do inside your cells is remarkable. Spermidine is naturally found in foods like wheat germ, mushrooms, aged cheese, and legumes. It activates autophagy by switching off an enzyme that normally keeps this cellular recycling process suppressed. In the context of cancer prevention, spermidine-induced autophagy has been specifically shown to target cells that accumulate abnormal proteins, and that accumulation of abnormal proteins is actually one of the defining characteristics of early precancerous cells. A 20-year prospective human study found that higher dietary intake of spermidine was independently associated with significantly lower cancer mortality. That is a 2-decade study following real human beings, and the results were clear and consistent. Now, urolithin A works through a slightly different but equally powerful mechanism. It is produced by beneficial gut bacteria after they metabolize natural compounds found in pomegranates, walnuts, and berries. Urolithin A activates a specialized form of autophagy called mitophagy, which specifically targets and removes damaged mitochondria, the energy-producing structures inside your cells. Damaged mitochondria generate excessive oxidative stress and abnormal metabolic activity, and those are exactly the kinds of conditions that precancerous cells exploit to survive and multiply. By removing these damaged mitochondria through mitophagy, your body is essentially eliminating one of cancer's earliest and most important biological advantages. It's cutting off the fuel supply before the fire ever has a chance to spread. And the beautiful thing about both of these compounds, spermidine and the precursors needed to produce urolithin A, is that you can get them through real, whole foods. Wheat germ, mushrooms, soybeans, green peas, pomegranates, walnuts, and raspberries are all excellent sources. These are not exotic, hard-to-find ingredients. They are foods that most people could realistically add to their diet starting this week. When I explain this to patients, the response I most often hear is something like, "I had no idea that eating pomegranates could do something that specific inside my cells." And that reaction makes perfect sense, because most of us were never taught to think about food at this level of biological precision. But this is exactly the kind of precision that the science now supports. The fourth trigger is in some ways the mirror image of the second one. Just as heat exposure activates autophagy through the heat shock response, cold exposure activates it through an entirely different but equally powerful biological pathway. When your body is exposed to genuine cold, not just slightly cool air, but real cold, it triggers a surge in a hormone called norepinephrine. Norepinephrine activates AMPK, which in turn suppresses the mTOR growth pathway that so many cancer cells depend on for their continued survival. Reduced mTOR activity means fewer growth signals are available to abnormal cells, and that creates a biological environment that is far less hospitable to early cancer development. But the benefits of cold exposure don't stop there. Cold also mobilizes natural killer cells, the immune system's primary cancer surveillance specialists. These are the cells whose job it is to patrol your body, looking for cells that are dividing abnormally. Autophagy works in direct coordination with these natural killer cells by exposing abnormal surface markers on unhealthy cells, making them far easier to identify and eliminate. The most practical way to incorporate cold exposure into your daily life is remarkably simple. End your morning shower with 1 to 2 minutes of genuinely cold water. Not lukewarm, actually cold. Cold plunges are another excellent option if you have access to them, but finishing your regular shower with cold water is far more realistic and sustainable for most people's daily schedules. And I want to emphasize the word daily here because consistency matters enormously with this particular strategy. Research suggests that daily cold exposure, even brief exposure, produces greater autophagy activation and stronger immune enhancement over time than occasional more intense cold experiences. Your body responds to regular, repeated signals. It adapts, it strengthens. And when it comes to cancer prevention, that kind of consistent biological signaling is exactly what we're aiming for. Small, daily actions that keep your cellular defense systems active and responsive. The fifth and final trigger on today's list is one that I suspect many of you have heard before in a general health context, but probably never connected to autophagy or cancer prevention specifically. And that is the quality of your sleep. I know, on the surface, sleep doesn't sound as dramatic as cold plunges or sauna sessions. But please hear me out, because the science here is genuinely striking. During deep sleep, your body performs autophagy at some of its highest recorded levels, not just in the brain, but throughout virtually every tissue in the body. Deep sleep is also when your immune system conducts one of its most comprehensive inspections for cellular abnormalities. And when natural killer cells are most actively patrolling your tissues, looking for cells that have begun dividing in abnormal ways. Sleep is not passive recovery time. Sleep is active biological maintenance at the cellular level. And when you consistently deprive yourself of quality sleep, you are directly suppressing one of your body's most powerful cancer prevention mechanisms. Research published in Nature Reviews Cancer found that circadian rhythm disruption, including irregular sleep schedules, night shift work, and chronic sleep deprivation, was independently associated with significantly higher rates of multiple types of cancer. Independently associated. That means the researchers controlled for other risk factors and still found that poor sleep on its own elevated cancer risk. That is a finding that deserves to be taken seriously. The most effective thing you can do to support healthy circadian rhythm and maximize nighttime autophagy is to maintain a consistent bedtime and wake time every single day, including weekends. Aim to keep both within about a 45-minute window. That consistency is what stabilizes your body's internal biological clock and allows deep, restorative sleep to happen reliably. For additional support, magnesium glycinate has good evidence behind it for improving sleep quality and promoting relaxation. Research suggests that approximately 80% of adults worldwide don't get enough magnesium through diet alone, so this is worth looking into. I've included a link to a high-quality, affordable option in the description below. Now, I want to circle back to something I mentioned at the very beginning of this video because I think it's one of the most important points I can leave you with today. There is a widespread belief that prolonged fasting is the primary and perhaps the only reliable way to activate autophagy at meaningful levels, and I want to address that directly. Prolonged fasting absolutely does activate autophagy, and for many people it can be a genuinely effective strategy. I'm not dismissing it. But what the current scientific literature increasingly suggests is that the highest levels of sustained, everyday autophagy are achieved not by relying on any single trigger, but by activating this process through multiple complementary mechanisms working together. Protein cycling, heat exposure, specific dietary compounds, cold exposure, and quality sleep. Each of these activates autophagy through distinct biological pathways. When you combine several of them consistently, you create a biological environment where autophagy is regularly and robustly active, quietly doing its job of clearing damaged and abnormal cells day after day. Researchers now estimate that between 45 and 50% of all cancers are associated with modifiable lifestyle factors. That is not a small number. That means nearly half of all cancer cases may be connected to choices that are within our control. The daily decisions you make, what you eat, how you sleep, whether you expose your body to heat or cold. How consistently you support your cellular health may significantly influence whether cancer ever gains a foothold in your body in the first place. That is an empowering truth, and it's one I want every single person watching this video to carry with them. You are not powerless when it comes to your health. Your body has extraordinary built-in defenses, and your lifestyle choices either support those defenses or suppress them. My goal with this channel has always been to give you the kind of information that helps you make choices that support them. And in my next video, I'll be discussing the most common everyday foods that directly fuel cancer cells, foods you may want to reconsider. Make sure you don't miss that one.